Well, hello again, everyone. This is Chris Joslin, your host, coming to you with another edition of Jaws Bites, where we are sponsored, as always, by iLevelLogistics.com. Come see us, where we curate information there, bring it to the public, and, of course, to the industry itself, those that want to grow and learn and understand where we're at in the logistics, international, or supply chain field. This is the place to find it. Industry indicators, specific articles, things from all over the United States, all over the world in terms of logistics are on that site ready to go, including some podcasts, some video casts that you can watch myself or some others talk about some of these subjects. Today we have John Glennon joining us from Chicago, Illinois. He is a professional in the industry. He's been working at it a little bit longer than myself, I think, which tells you that he's got some acumen behind him with some big corporations and with his own businesses as well, where he's done some consulting work. He's delved into all kinds of different things, whether it's from the intermodal marketing arena, whether it's from the international transporter arena in Canada and Mexico, or whether it's developing engineered solutions for private and public clients alike. So let us welcome today Mr. John Glennon. Well, welcome, Mr. Glennon. I appreciate you spending some time with us today, and I look forward to diving into a couple of subjects with you and getting your expertise out into the podcast world for those that are clamoring for your wisdom, so to speak.
Yeah, all three people. You mean it's great to be with you, Chris. Thanks.
Yeah, all three people. Well, that's how we grow, right? That's you start out with something and you see how things progress, and you get enough information out there with enough people that are looking for that. And these days, the thing that I've kind of discovered, John, is that, and I think you've probably seen this as well, the logistics transportation industry is coming into focus for not just people in our industry, but for people outside our industry in a way that it never has in its history that I know of. I mean, you and I hate to say how long we've been doing this. Well, maybe we should start there, John. How long have you been in the transportation logistics industry? Maybe just kind of, tell us a little bit about your background, because I know that it's pretty diverse.
Yes, no, Chris, I'm happy to do it. Yeah, we came up almost on parallel paths together, and that's how we eventually started doing some working together toward building solutions. But I've been in the transportation world essentially since I got out of school in the late 80s, which is kind of scary, but I have seen a lot of
You mean
evolution.
kindergarten, right?
Right, exactly. But I started in the intermodal world, and that certainly has taken me and us in a lot of different directions. But that then broadened into, increased demand for more diverse portfolios of services. So, from intermodal and then into truck brokerage and then into ultimately engineered solutions. But I think that the intermodal world, as we know, has certainly changed, and it's grown into a very much a capacity play and model. And so yeah, I've been really blessed in my career and been able to work with some large forward thinking companies. I started a logistics company for the Illinois Central Railroad that evolved into one for the Canadian National Railroad and was spun off. But it's been a great ride and a great journey. And as you know, there's a lot of challenges facing us now that we're able to reflect on and compare to what the past always brought to us.
Right.
And
So you've kind of
yeah,
had it sounds like you kind of straddled the U.S. northern border a bit in your career as well, right?
for
Looking
sure.
at both sides of it. It's significantly different from my understanding in how the intermodal side, the railroad side of things are developed up there.
Yes, it is. That transborder, cross-border product, and of course we've been involved together as well in Mexico,
Hmm.
U.S. and Mexico, and Canada, in trying to build transborder, cross-border solutions. But yeah, it's been quite a challenge because all the things that go along with it, right? Customs clearance and currency adjustments and all these different things, right?
Yeah.
And we face those essentially today as well. But those networks are very much static and defined in terms of infrastructure,
Hmm.
and our challenge is to try to take that design and expand it and try to go, interline and provide solutions that are going to, give the railroads business and capacity where they need it.
Right. And one of the largest difficulty, you mentioned Mexico in passing there while you're saying something a moment ago. And I think it's important as well for those that are listening, watching, and those that are trying to develop a career in the logistics industry to understand that there are, certainly the United States is an unbelievable powerhouse economically, but there's a larger economic bloc that includes Canada and Mexico specifically that are tied. Everybody knows about NAFTA and now I can't even remember the acronym that's used for the current version of that after NAFTA was pushed aside for the new methodology. But there's so many economic ties, labor ties, transport of good ties, raw materials in one direction, finished goods in another, et cetera, et cetera. And the reason I bring that up to a larger degree than you just did a moment ago is that I think one of the biggest challenges that I would love to hear your input about is balance. I mean, it's always been a challenge in our industry when there's consuming areas versus manufacturing areas and keeping the flow of available space equipment in quotations in the right places. But with what happened over the last couple 3 years, where things were shut down so dramatically and things were started, it's like the whole world turned off, and then when it turned back on, it was like drinking out of a fire hose, right?
You're absolutely,
And
no one could have predicted how and when that happened. You're right.
yeah, the challenge now is trying to figure out, okay, we've got these things going on, and we've got all kinds of economic turmoil that are associated with this stuff, but the balance had been thrown so far off kilter that the easiest method for large companies, equipment providers, underlying carriers, and whether it's the steamship lines or the railroads or over the road carriers, one of the easiest ways they try to adjust to these kind of things is simply changing very, very dramatically the price indices. And I, it's a tough pill to swallow as all that stuff rolls down to you and I going to the store and buying something.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're seeing it. We're seeing those results, and I think most of the people that are listening now are feeling the pain at the pump and seeing it in retail prices, and so you're right, and a lot of the fingers are pointed at the supply chain, right? And I think to your point about, areas of consumption versus areas of supply, and what it's forcing the industry to do and for us to do, is to innovate and to figure out ways to where, I've heard more than one person say, look, it's not a supply chain issue, right? It's a chassis issue. It's having the right equipment in the right areas. We're seeing here in Chicago where I live, we're seeing individual truckers caught up in rail terminals for 6, 8 hours a day. It's pretty hard to drive any kind of efficiencies and innovate, when you've got that ball and chain around your leg trying to figure out how
Exactly.
to make a buck. So, the easy solution is, well, we just got to pay more money for all the waiting time, right? And that doesn't necessarily translate into efficiency, right? We've got
Well,
to
that's a
figure out
band-aid,
better
right?
way. Yeah,
That,
right.
that's the way I look at it. It's a big band-aid. Maybe it's a wrap, body wrap. I don't know what it is. But ultimately all it does is slow down the bleeding that occurs. May even stop it temporarily, but it's not a fix. It's reactive instead of
Right.
proactive. And I don't know about you, John, but my entire career in this business, which has been way longer than I expected, is always been around, as you had said a moment ago, engineering solutions for people, which almost always have as its priority some type of efficiency, drive toward efficiency to bring cost out or profit into a situation or a process. And what I see now is this collision occurring between people, and I like to call it nimble logistics. A lot of people call it agile, being more agile, or
Sure.
whatever whatever the moniker you want to put on it. I call it nimble logistics, but this collision between being very nimble because of the volatility in the overall market, in the industry, et cetera, and the continual need to try to find ways to be more efficient, whether it's technologically, whether it's understanding personnel better, whether it's migrating the minefield of regulations that are out there, because there's always something new coming at you. I mean, what's your perspective on some of that?
We often talk about the two worlds colliding, right? A transactional world, the world we find ourselves having to live in, but a strategic world where and I'm talking about supply chain, right? To where just what you said a moment ago, where we have to figure out a better way to drive efficiency through what is that fixed transactional world, right? We've got an unprecedented volume of imports coming in, right? Everyone's reading about the ports and the ships and the congestion and things like that. Well, some of the things that I've been involved in trying to engineer and design solutions is working with partner carriers. C&K Trucking and Mike Burton's company in Chicago is someone that we've partnered with in several areas. But we're working with them to try to take some of this import capacity, right? And that's typically being repositioned to the West Coast empty to go back onto a vessel that the Pacific Rim be reloaded, to try to figure out and provide shippers here with opportunities to fill that 40-foot cube, and answer some of those chassis deficit issues and things like that. So you're right. We are taking what seems to be a pretty fixed capacity model and trying to find better ways to design solutions to get that equipment where it needs to be, while at the same time serving the client base who need to put freight in it.
And that's a great example. It really is, that particular example of, because the way I've always viewed transportation, you and I have talked enough to know, that I feel, when you corner everything into an FU or a TEU or a domestic 53-foot container or a over-the-road trailer or whatever, all you're really talking about is space. And
Correct.
the idea of any industry and to create balance is to make sure that the space you have available, no matter what the size of the container or trailer you're talking about, is utilized to its highest extent. And the balance that occurs is understanding the network and the need. If you're talking about international cans, the need for them to get back over to Asia, for example, in an expedited manner to return the possibility of more goods to get on the shelf of the local stores
Right.
you and I go into. So there's an equation to be looked at. There's an algorithm to be designed that takes the available equipment in Chicago that needs to go back to the ports, that's going empty all the time,
For sure.
and utilizing a portion of it to the benefit of the manufacturers of raw material or the retailers or the exporters or whoever it may be. And that in our careers time, we can see there's huge opportunities for efficiency there, but it's all up to the individuals, you and me and our counterparts sitting over, poring over spreadsheets or databases and looking for anomalous things to fill. That's where I think one of our largest opportunities are. And in the field itself, to use the right technologies to, hit those notes, to get that 40-footer, get for every amount of lading that can go in a 40-footer back to the coast, you've freed up other capacity. You've created, in one shape or form, quote unquote, virtual capacity for the industry.
Absolutely right. That's the concept. You nailed
Mhm.
it. And I think you're right in terms of the technological solutions that you and I are always working to design and identify for our client base are key, right? That having visibility and having the horsepower technologically to take advantage of that visibility, and turn virtual capacity into a real truck with a real container that we can run over the road, or that regionally, or that we can put on a train and run, transcontinental, and fill these different voids and niches that a lot of people are shrugging their shoulders and seeing exorbitantly high freight rates that you pointed to a minute ago.
Yeah, and I think the hardest part of it is, well, there's two things that I think push back very hard on people like you and me talking to customers about gaining these efficiency through more intelligent use of their own processes. And the first one, in my opinion, is disparate transportation management solutions systems. There's too many that don't talk well to each other.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's very manual to get them to. And I think that itself, if there was a way to harmonize some of these platforms, to create better APIs between them, to understand the complexity of a large shipper's needs and the needs of a large carrier's network, and combine them in a better way. And transportation management solutions have talked about doing that forever, and they do a certain amount of job based on the key performance indicators that you and I would program into something as the
Mhm.
important elements. The problem is some guys' important elements over there are not ours. And coming together and, like I said, harmonizing that is, I think, the largest thing we need to overcome. And the second thing is you got to make it simple,
Right.
because on a day-to-day basis people are pounding out freight, and if it's complicated and they have to use half their day to solve a problem to save $50, they're not going to do it. They're
Right
going to
on.
turn around and just do it the simplest way, which is move something empty.
Yeah, no, and you're right, and I think that's that old strategic versus transactional mentality, right? The TMS systems that we've seen, and trying to figure out the best way to harmonize them, as you put it, is key to any corporate strategy, right? I mean,
Yeah.
we've seen the emergence and growth and evolution of supply chain all the way from the university level through to the C level. And I think that the importance of supply chain and the function that we provide and perform is key, in any corporate environment, in driving additional efficiencies, and as you pointed to as well, changing strategies and doing things operationally to accommodate that is key to any overall corporate strategy. And we're seeing the more savvy companies and beneficial cargo owners that we work with who are getting it and seeing the value that they can do by thinking strategically.
Well, you and I have both you know championed progress for corporations we worked for, and then we've led our own companies.
Sure.
So we can see that the priorities for the company also sometimes will differ from what may be best on a transactional level to develop or a strategic level to develop. A large company that's being, on NASDAQ may be interested more on just what this particular quarter and what the pipeline of potential customers are to show off to the potential buyers of their stock, instead of maybe a 5-year plan to get something done. And I don't want to I don't want to put an umbrella over everybody. It's not that way. There's usually, you can, as they say, you can walk and chew gum at the same time. You can think quarter by quarter and design things that benefit the people that own your stock at the same time of thinking longer term. But I think a lot of times what it comes down to is there's this hierarchy of needs that companies have, and there's importance put on all of those. But what ends up getting done first, and we harkened back to this a little bit ago when we talked about throwing money at problems. What ends up is the urgent and important stuff gets done. It should be done first. But what happens is the important side of it sometimes is put off to the side, and it just means urgent, 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 urgent. And when I think about that, and here's where I'm going with that, John,
Sure.
is today everybody is focused, from the national media to if you go on my website, the iLevelLogistics.com, where we curate a lot of this information. We always have stuff about drivers. We always have stuff about electric technologies that are coming out. We always have things about solutions to combat the unbelievable rate of inflation and the high level of fuel prices, et cetera. And there's no easy solutions to any of that. But there are some that are avoided entirely until fuel gets to the price that it is now.
Correct.
And the number one thing I always think about is that the lack of drivers. And I've had podcasts I've done about that, and how that's kind of it's partly due to regulations. It's partly due to hours of service. It's partly due to a lot of different things. It's very there's I think I've referenced this a number of times. An MIT transport lab has studied this many times, and their most recent basically says if they could get a driver on the road for another 14 minutes of actual driving per day, there would literally be no shortage of drivers at the moment.
That's a
Yeah.
great point, and I've seen those same statistics, and you're absolutely right. That gets back to utilization, right? By being more efficient, we're increasing capacity by proxy, and so many people have a difficult time getting their head around that, and I understand it, but you're absolutely right. And I think that what you mentioned a minute ago about taking that broad view and looking at the quality of life in our industry, especially where the rubber literally meets the road, right? Under and behind a driver, and trying to figure out how to best accommodate their needs and their quality of life, right? So that they're home with their family, and they're making a fair wage, and they're treated well at all these different facilities, from railroads to warehouses, is key, right? And I think that some of these broader strategic solutions we've touched on, have to touch that, right? They have to reach that far to do what we know needs to be done.
Well, right at the beginning, when you were talking about in Chicago, there where you're at, and some of the drivers at the terminals spending half their day to pick up one load.
Right.
Well, that translates into dollars and cents. In we can point fingers all over the place on that, but ultimately, it has to come down to all the parties that are involved in this uh, picking up, I don't know, 10% of the slack from each of their own directions. If everybody picked up 10% of the slack and created a more efficient product, then 10% better during a day for any one driver translates into, I'm not doing the math in my head right, but if you can get that means one more load or one more
Huge
transaction of its
difference,
time
right?
within. I
Game
mean,
change.
it's game changing.
Yeah.
And I think the statistical people that do the analysis on these, people that compile data sets and things like that, they understand this. But again, I think it comes down to things being more effective to just add more, add more drivers, raise the rate, and the quality of life is really important. I think this was maybe a year ago. I put out an article and a podcast on the need to have a more driver centric thought pattern for companies. They're not, they are in my opinion, the most important element to the transportation world in general,
Without a
because
doubt.
they are the touch at the origin and they are the touch at the destination. We could go down the road and talk about autonomous vehicles all we want, but there are autonomous vehicles out right now. You go to some of the ports and they have autonomous electric vehicles that run around and pick up chassis and move them around from these it's just like a giant warehouse, right?
Sure.
You have kind of lines in the cement that guide these things, and they just do the same pattern over. Those are great efficiencies to have. But the aspect of AI being good enough to have truly autonomous driving, I mean, truly autonomous driving in cities in particular, is a long ways off, in my opinion.
Yeah,
So,
agreed.
so I think about that and I think, okay, diesel's high, efficiency is in need. Owner operators are having fits because of the amount of fuel costs they have. So that in part with how this administration and governments in general want to convert to more clean technologies is driving a lot of attention toward electronic, or I say electronic, but electric powered vehicles. And I mean, there's a lot of hair on that. I like that to a degree, but I'm also, and I've said this in other discussions I've had, I'm kind of an incrementalist. I'm not a let's burn it down and start all over again. I'm more of a let's think of all the ways possible to solve and make our current situation more effective and efficient through engineered solutions, as you talked about a minute ago, while bringing on new technologies. And you do it over a course of 20 years, not two. you know.
Right. Right. And we can do that, Chris. It's a great segue into something you and I know are passionate about, in terms of trying to take our current model and figure out better, more efficient ways to make it work. Right. I I'm invested in a company called SPI Systems Corporation. They are in the process of developing a product. Well, it's already developed. I mean, it's being tested in several fleets. It's called SPIER, SPIER, and it's an acronym for SPI, which is the company, exhaust reaction.
Hmm.
And we took that challenge you just outlined a minute ago and said, look, there's better ways to do, for engines to burn diesel fuel, right? We've more or less shrugged our shoulders and said, wow, this is something we're going to have to deal with, from everything from emissions, which, by the way, you've seen the EPA requirements, right? I had a good friend of mine in the industry say that, we all knew that the wolf was coming, but now it's at the door.
Yeah,
And,
that's
and,
about
and
right.
especially in terms of how are we going to do this, right? Are we going to continue to petition Washington to hold off on some of their clean air initiatives, but what we've done with this Spear product that I mentioned a second ago is we've discovered a better, more efficient way to utilize the gases that typically have been going out the exhaust pipe and reintroduce them back into the combustion chamber to essentially make more efficient combustion.
So
And
this is not, you're not talking about a fuel additive here. You're talking about an
no,
actual engineered solution, correct?
exactly right. It's plumbing essentially, and in the, there's some proprietary elements to it that in a measured way put these beneficial gases, let's call them free radicals. I could bore you for a long
Ah.
time with the science of it, but
Mhm.
we're seeing some really positive results, and that excites me because I think, again, to your point, instead of that 20-year vision of, okay, if we are transitioning to an electric environment, what are we going to do with the 60 million plus diesel trucks out there right now? How are we going to get better?
Mhm.
And the Spear product is really been interesting because we're seeing ancillary benefits in addition to, as a result of the cleaner combustion, that goes along with that. We're seeing increased miles per gallon, depending upon terrain, torque, ambient temperatures, it varies. But we're seeing, on the low end, 5% on up to 15+%, which is getting a lot of people's attention in a $6 per gallon diesel fuel environment. But we're also seeing those ancillary benefits of reduced NOx, right? Reduced
Okay.
CO2, and
Right.
addressing a lot of these things that so many carriers out there said we have no idea what we're going to do about it, as well as the OEMs, right?
Well, let me ask you a question or two. You'd said that there's a lot of variability in the performance depending on temperature, ambient temperature, grade of the route, and there's probably a ton of things, wind variances, all
Sure.
that, right? Is that so much different than what you would have just with standard fuel? Because your fuel efficiency, just without what you're talking about, is different depending on the slope of your route, the wind
Right.
conditions, everything else. So that doesn't surprise me at all. But I think the thing that jumped out at me for what you just said there was the um, the NOx,
Hmm.
and probably some kind of soot buildup and things like that as well. Which I don't know about you. I don't know what the averages are. I probably could look it up, but the repair, especially on used diesel trucks, can be giant. And this sounds to me like this type of engineered solution would have a return or a lessening of that repair bill for a company as well.
It does. That's a great point. We're seeing, again, along with these ancillary benefits of cleaner combustion, of much less downtime, right? And much less of that soot buildup. And some of the other things that we're discovering as well, Chris, are, much less demand for diesel exhaust fluid, which is another DEF, right? The industry
Right.
knows it as that, where that's a benefit. So that excites me because it takes what, our current infrastructure looks like and what we're dealing with, and pushes it forward, right? And forces us all to get better. And it's been an interesting journey. And again, like I mentioned to you, we're testing it with several large fleets, and the initial response that we're getting, even for the driver level, which has really interested me, the drivers saying that they can feel a um, better power. They're getting more power.
Hmm.
And again, I'm excited about that, only in that it's something that takes us here and now and available, and dealing with what we all know we need to deal with.
I think It's so funny because I know that on iLevel we put out we were on all these different platforms and everything, and we try to be as integrated as possible in some of these things like Instagram Reels and TikTok and all this stuff. We have some things
Sure.
going on. And one of the things that went out, I think earlier today, that got a lot of attention was just this real short 20-second blurb about things you could buy with the gas tax relief thing that's supposedly what is not gas tax
Yeah, the
relief,
gas tax holiday.
holiday, yeah, the holiday. It sounds to me like what this solution possibly is gaining is better than a permanent gas tax holiday as far
Absolutely.
as the money back on the fuel spent.
Mhm.
So I'd imagine, and it's an aftermarket thing, correct?
It
I would
is.
imagine Spear is probably saying, "Oh, someday we want it in the market for the ones that are being built, I suppose." But at least initially, this, and your point is really good because I'm an advocate for intelligent change. Okay, the EV world is very interesting to me. I've met with some people that are building infrastructure on that, and but the reason people are diving into it so heavy is because there's such a large subsidy for it. A brand new Volvo, and the prices are changing every day because of rare earth minerals and things that are needed for these batteries that are right out of Russia and Ukraine, right? That creates
Sure.
other issues and problems. But I believe, I'm trying to remember correctly, but I believe it was somewhere close to $460,000 for a brand new Volvo, and I don't. It's like phase one, right? So I don't know what they're going to be, but there's about 150, $160,000 subsidy on them if you're doing it right here in California. And there's a lot of reasons to do things in California with all the air resource board stuff that's coming out, and
Sure.
the particulates legislation, et cetera. But that is a tremendous high amount of revenue and capital to spend if you're a large trucking company. And if you could come and join, like go in both, like I said earlier, chew and walk at the same time, and say, okay, we've got this fleet. Let's modify a certain portion of the fleet to make it more efficient, and let's start down the track of electric vehicles and do this instead of just trying to change over all at once.
You're right. To 20 years versus to, 2 weeks kind of a
Hmm.
solution. And that's what we have to do. They have to be tempered and they have to happen at the same time, right? Together.
Right.
And
Right.
it's funny, you mentioned about the mineral aspect of this thing and the supply of batteries. I met with a fleet a couple of weeks ago, and we in the topic always seems to turn toward EV, and their read and approach on it was, John, we don't know if these batteries are going to last 6 days, 6 weeks, or 6 years, and nor do the manufacturers. I mean, they've done testing, they're doing testing on the fly, right? Not to mention, the infrastructure necessary to charge them up. But the replacement cost on these batteries make that already exorbitant price tag even more prohibitive if you find yourself having to replace these multiple $1,000 batteries with new ones.
Yeah, and even if the batteries are very, very good, the technology at this point is, you got about 300 miles max,
Right.
and that's probably not with a full lading. And I know, and I wish I had it in front of me, but I know that the new Ford F-150 that's coming out. I know this is not Class 8, but this is Ford F-150. They're touting, I think, 350 miles on that. But if you hook up a trailer to it, you're down to about 150. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? So,
Right. It's
so
about torque and power
there's
demand.
so many different things. There's so many
Sure.
different variables, and all that stuff could be overcome if at every gas station nationwide there was an electronic, a 20-second recharge station too. But there's not, and it's going to be a very long time till that happens. So I think the message that both of us, I think we're both on the same page. Yeah, let's move our world into a higher quality of usage of energy, a different type of energy that makes more sense for a longer period of time, that isn't consuming resources, the way petroleum does, et cetera. All those things are nice to talk about in good thinking where the environment is concerned. But let's do it pragmatically, and let's think, if we have this giant infrastructure already in place, let's take our time, let's develop solutions, whether they're fuel additives or whether they're engineered solutions like you're talking about, and let's move forward with those so that we can adapt to things over a period of time. I think that's
Absolutely.
hugely important.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I agree with you, Chris, and I think that doing those kinds of things and making the technology and the development of more efficient ways to do it have to happen concurrently, right? And I
Yeah.
think that we can get better. We need to get better, right? As an industry, and from manufacturing trucks, and we're proving through that Spear product that there are better, more efficient ways to do it that touch a lot of pain points, right? Most
Hmm.
important of the air we breathe, right? We all want our kids and their kids to to be in a better environment, right?
Hmm.
And so I think those kinds of things are going to continue to address climate change in a positive way,
Hmm.
because you're right. We with that amount, or the 60 million plus trucks out on the road, we owe it to the industry and to the country, to the world, to get better at doing it more efficient.
Right. Couldn't agree more. This has been a great conversation, John. I really appreciate it, and maybe I can have you on again for a longer, extended dive. Maybe not into this specific subject, but I think that what we touched on earlier about balance and networks and across an economic block, both south of our south border and north of our north border, I think there's a lot more coming with the synergies along those lines.
Oh, I'd love to, buddy. It's always great
Yeah.
talking with you. It's always good to be with you, and I love comparing notes.
Yeah, yeah. Unfortunately, most of my notes are in on yellow legal pads still scribbled in, which tells you how old I am,
When
right?
you and I first met in the industry, we both had full heads of hair, so.
Oh, you know what? You are correct about that. I'm waiting for you to go
I
the whole
know. I
way
don't know
here,
if I can
dude.
pull it off or not.
Yeah, you can. You just have to do this first, 'cause,
Right,
that
right.
covers up all kinds of things. But hey, again, great to have you, John. Very much appreciated to get a little bit of your insight, and we'll be talking to you real soon. Okay?
Sounds great. I look forward to it, Chris. Thanks, buddy.
Fantastic. Thanks.